Well, our big focus, peace talks between Russia and Ukraine remain up in the air as President Vladimir Putin is notably absent from Russia's in-person delegation list. And US leader Donald Trump, he has announced he will no longer go to the Turkey summit either. A US official said that Mr. Trump would no longer join the talks in Istanbul, having previously toyed with the idea of going if Putin was attending. Russia announced their delegation list just last evening, and the list did not include Putin's name. Instead, the delegation included his advisor, his deputy defense minister, and the director of the main intelligence directorate of the GRU, which is Russia's military intelligence agency. On the other hand, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, his advisor, has made it clear that the leader would not meet any representative of Russia in Turkey except the Kremlin leader. We have a reaction from the US president lined up for you. Listen in.
What happens on Thursday if President Putin doesn't show up in Turkey for the talks with Ukraine? What will you do?
Well, I don't know if he's showing up. I know he would like me to be there. And that's a possibility. If we could end the war, I'd be thinking about that. Now, tomorrow, we're all booked out, you understand, and we're all set.
But you'd go if he goes?
Go UAE tomorrow. And so we have a very full situation. Now, that doesn't mean I wouldn't do it to save a lot of lives and come back. But, yeah, I think they're thinking about something. I don't know that he would be there if I'm not there. We're going to find out. Parker's going, and Parker's been very effective.
My colleague Gauri Dwivedi has been tracking the finer developments for us. She joins us live at the moment. Gauri, as we're given to understand, Vladimir Putin is skipping the peace talks in Istanbul. As the Kremlin says, it's too early to predict the outcome of talks. So can we really be optimistic about what happens in Istanbul today?
Parmeshwar, one needs to be very measured in terms of tempering expectations from this meeting. Yes, it is taking place after the 3-year-long grinding war continues. But it also comes at a time when all sides, and when I say all, there are 3 sides to this, US, Russia, Ukraine. All 3 of them are actually pretty much playing on political brinkmanship, so to say. So to that extent, all sides expect limited outcomes of it. But one cannot miss the fact that this is the first such possibility of some sort of a ceasefire, some sort of a broad peace agreement that could eventually come into effect. The fact that it's not a heads of state level meeting does mean that the outcomes could be limited. But the fact that they are talking for the first time in 3 years also indicate that there is some possibility of give and take. As far as why this has come down from the heads of state to the level of delegation, as I said, there is political brinkmanship that both sides are playing. Russia is very clear that they would probably like to come on the table. Putin would like to come on the table when the military leverage is significant and he speaks from a greater position of strength. As far as US is concerned, President Trump did, in fact, met out a heavy blow to Russia, given the fact that he's normalized ties with the Syrian president, effectively cutting Russia's deep interests and stakes in that entire region. So that allows him to probably come to the table at a later point of time with more leverage. As far as Ukraine is concerned, well, you can blame President Trump for being blunt, but sometimes he's effective. When he said that he has no cards on the table, President Zelensky does have limited leverage right now, except for probably expecting that this could eventually lead to some sort of a peace roadmap. How that will come, how soon that will come, Parmeshwar, is very difficult to say at this stage.
Right, Gauri, thank you so much for joining us with those details. We will, of course, revert to you for regular updates. As Gauri is highlighting, there is some possibility of give and take. We'll, of course, keep an eye on all the developments in Istanbul. For now, let's turn our attention. Well, following the Pahalgam attack, India is petitioning the UNSC Sanctions Committee to designate the Resistance Front, TRF, as a terrorist organization. An Indian team is presenting evidence of Pakistan's involvement in terrorism, specifically TRF's role in the April 22nd attack that killed 26 civilians. Pakistan, with China's support, has previously shielded TRF from UNSC condemnation. But TRF has emerged as an offshoot of Lashkar-e-Toiba after Article 370 was abrogated in Jammu and Kashmir in 2019. And the National Investigation Agency's probe has nailed TRF's involvement not just in planning and killings, but also recruiting terrorists and smuggling weapons. And meanwhile, amid calls for boycotting travel to Turkey and Azerbaijan, flight bookings to these two nations have dropped by 60% in the last 1 week, and cancellations have surged to 250%, believe it or not. This is what Make My Trip has confirmed to NDTV. The two countries had openly supported Pakistan after India had launched airstrikes under Operation Sindoor on 9 terrorist sites in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. But following this, Indians launched a campaign on social media to boycott travel to Turkey and Azerbaijan. By the way, as per latest reports, the Confederation of All India Traders, which has about 40,000 aligned associations and about 80 to 90 million members, they have also urged Indian citizens and traders to boycott travel to Turkey as well as Azerbaijan. Also, if the Indo-Pak crossfires had taken the steam out of travel plans in the peak summer vacation, the ceasefire has brought some revival. To the relief of the travel industry, they are seeing this stream of cancellations die out as far as other routes, minus Turkey and Azerbaijan, are concerned, though travelers are still treading with caution, as you can imagine. Flight operations have normalized post the ceasefire, so 32 airports in India are now fully operational. There are no curbs on civilian flights, as existed last week, so the temporary curbs have been lifted on civilian flights in India, but you must note that strict security checks still remain. Tanushka Datta has been tracking the latest for us. She joins us over the phone line at the moment. Tanushka, so as we're given to understand, all airports are functioning normally for civilian flights in India. Take us through also whether there's been a recovery in demand for both domestic and international routes.
Parmeshwar, the demand is picking up. Of course, there are still anxieties. There's a mix of precaution and normalcy that is at this point. Passengers and airlines both are trying to strike a balance with respect to it. Even the ministry, with the Union Minister for Civil Aviation, Ram Mohan Naidu, chairing these important meetings back-to-back over the course of the past 2 days with the DGCA, the Airport Authority Chairman, the air traffic control teams as well. So they've also been having their own discussions with respect to how can a swift rerouting be managed to ensure seamless transition at this point back to normalcy, because reopening of 32 airports across the country is not an overnight matter. As far as airlines individually are concerned, as of yesterday and day before yesterday, Indigo and Air India were maintaining, not operating out of certain routes in northern and western regions of our country, such as that of Jammu, Chandigarh, Srinagar, Leh, Amritsar. But from today onwards, Indigo has also put it out in one of its advisories that they are going to begin with their services and restart their services even at these airports.
As always, Tanushka, thank you so much for joining us with the latest. In other crucial news, in a big reveal, the government of India has said that the Indian Air Force had successfully jammed Chinese air defense systems that Pakistan had installed all along its border and line of control with India. In another significant revelation, India has said that it's carried out its mission in under 23 minutes, showing India's defense superiority over the terror-sponsoring nation. Vishnu Shom joins you with further details.
Fresh details have emerged on the nature of the Indian airstrikes on Pakistani targets. These are, of course, the attacks which took place after India's initial attacks on terror training centers. The new information suggests that the operations against Pakistani air bases and air defense facilities was over in a period of approximately 23 minutes. And within this time, the Indian strikes were able to go through because Chinese-made air defense systems of the Pakistani armed forces had been jammed effectively by Indian armed forces. The press release by the government also speaks about the nature of the weapons which were used. Several Indian weapon systems were used both in the offensive and the defensive operations. There is a widespread belief in India that the reason Pakistan came to the ceasefire table was the success and the weight of India's strikes on a number of Pakistani air bases. Vishnu Shom for NDTV.
Well, US President Donald Trump announced an economic exchange with Qatar worth $1.2 trillion as the deal-making between the US and the Gulf kept flowing. Washington and Doha vowed to deepen their defense partnership, while Qatar said it would buy up to 210 jets from US aircraft giant Boeing, which is a deal touted as the largest in the company's history. Trump has long been fascinated with aviation and sees it as a key to diplomacy. This is what analysts have noted, allowing world governments to appeal to him through the persuasive power of planes. That tendency is perhaps most evidenced by Qatar offering Trump that luxury jet for use as Air Force One, a gift the president has endorsed despite growing bipartisan scrutiny. But the US president also met with Syria's new leader and said Washington would consider normalizing relations with Syria. That sit-down reflected the remarkable rise of President Ahmed al-Shara, who years ago was wanted by the United States over al-Qaeda ties. For an expert view on the matter, we have with us this morning James Dorsey joining us on NDTV. Mr. Dorsey, thank you so much for your time. How should we interpret President Trump's historic meeting with Ahmed al-Shara, given that just months ago the US had actually listed him as linked to a terrorist organization?
The United States still lists him as linked to a terrorist organization. Fact of the matter is that the designation was maintained, even though over the last decade we've seen progressively Ahmed al-Shara and his Hayat Tahrir al-Sham rebel group move away from jihadist positions. In December, they toppled former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, and it's been clear since then that the new government in Syria is trying to rebuild or build a relationship with the United States. That was something that the Gulf states, particularly Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, favored. And I think that was made very clear to Trump during his visit to the Gulf.
Also, Mr. Dorsey, we're hearing of this $96 billion aircraft deal that's been announced. Would you say this is transactional diplomacy, masking deeper military or energy ambitions between Doha and Washington?
Well, clearly, this is, at the moment you have about $3.6 trillion in Saudi, Qatari, and Emirati business deals, investments,
yes,
acquisitions from the United States. Those are huge amounts, of course. But what they do involve much closer cooperation between those Gulf states and the United States in military terms, in aviation, in technology, all of the kind of issues that the Gulf states and the United States are interested in.
Right, and then would you argue that this trip is primarily about business and optics? Or is there a deeper geopolitical recalibration underway as far as US Gulf relations are concerned?
I think it's both. Now, how far the geopolitical realignment goes, we'll have to see. In many ways, if you look at what Trump was saying in his speech, his major speech in Saudi Arabia, he essentially was putting the Gulf states, if not on par, but much closer to being on par with Israel in terms of their relationship to the United States and their importance to the United States. A lot of what Trump has done has been not what Israel wanted and perceived to be in its interest.
Right.
Now, what that all means, I think remains to be seen. I would see as the litmus test of the geopolitical aspects of the Trump trip two things. One is whether the United States acts on Israel's military presence in Syria, and that's complicated given that Trump, in his first term, recognized Israeli annexation of the Golan Heights, occupied during the 1967 Middle East War, and the second litmus test, of course, is whether he pushes seriously with leverage towards a ceasefire in Gaza.
Yes, we are keeping a close eye on all those developments. But then, Mr. Dorsey, looking at the full arc of Trump's Middle East tour, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Qatar, and next the UAE, do you think there's a story we're perhaps not paying enough attention to?
I think the greatest story here is really, or not the greatest story, an important story here is domestic U.S. With other words, what we're seeing is a policy pursued by Trump during his Gulf visit that is in line with the Make America Great Again faction of the Trump administration, which is much more critical of Israel, does not see Israeli and U.S. and Israeli interests by definition being identical, versus the pro-Israel faction or pro-Israel figures within the administration who've lost a number of battles in recent months.
Right. Meanwhile, as we wrap, I just want to touch upon another aspect, which is Trump's tone on Iran. It seems to have shifted from pressure to peaceful intent. Would you say this is diplomatic posturing, or do you see some real movement towards de-escalation?
Well, I think that that Trump, like Iran, wants to avoid a military conflagration. Right. The question really is at what price? Trump has said very clearly he does not want to see enrichment of uranium in Iran. He wants ballistic missiles and the Iranian relationship to non-state allies in the region to be part of any agreement. Iran has said none of that is negotiable. What's important here, I think, also is that the Gulf states are obviously concerned about the nuclear issue, but they are far more concerned about ballistic missiles and relationships to non-state allies. And so whether or not that bridge or that gap in the negotiations can be bridged is what we're going to have to wait and see.
Yes, and we will, of course, revert to you for regular updates. Thank you so much, Mr. Dorsey, for your time. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
On that note, we're slipping into a very quick commercial break. Back in a moment with the latest updates. Do stay tuned. Well, Israeli military strikes have killed at least 80 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip on Wednesday in an intensification of the bombardment as US President Donald Trump visits the Middle East. Medics have said that most of the dead, including women and children, were killed in a barrage of Israeli airstrikes on houses in the Jabalia area of northern Gaza. And with that, let's turn our attention now to the neighborhood, to Bangladesh specifically, where the International Monetary Fund is set to actually release $1.3 billion to Bangladesh in June after completing a fourth review of its $4.7 billion loan program and a key breakthrough in talks on exchange rate reforms. This is what the country's finance ministry has confirmed. The funds, covering both the fourth and fifth tranches, had been held up as the IMF had pressed for greater exchange rate flexibility, particularly the adoption of a crawling peg mechanism. Well, let's switch tracks now. Tech giant Apple has agreed to pay $95 million to settle a class action lawsuit involving Siri voice assistant. You know, earlier this year, Apple had agreed to pay $95 million to settle a 2019 lawsuit accusing the tech company of deploying its virtual assistant Siri to eavesdrop on people using its iPhones as well as other devices. But the settlement stems from accusations that Siri recorded users' private conversations and in some cases passed them on to third-party contractors for evaluation. Apple users can now file claims with the new website set up for this case, and the $95 million settlement, it stems from public backlash after a 2019 investigation by The Guardian revealed that Apple contractors had access to sensitive audio recordings from Siri, including private medical details and personal conversations, as I mentioned. And meanwhile, Burberry has launched a major cost-cutting drive, putting up 1,700 jobs at risk after it slumped into the red following a hefty fall in sales, actually. Britain's biggest luxury fashion brand made a pre-tax loss of £66 million for the 12 months to 29th March, compared with a £383 million profit in the previous year. Revenue for the year was actually down 17%, and Burberry, famed for its signature check, said it had suffered a challenging first half and warned of a difficult macroeconomic backdrop. With that, let's turn our attention now to Hyderabad, where the 72nd edition of the Miss World pageant is taking place. The ceremony was held at the Gachibowli Stadium in Hyderabad with Telangana Chief Minister Revanth Reddy officially declaring the event open, as you can see. More than 110 contestants from across the globe are participating in this event, and Miss India Nandini Gupta is representing the host nation. But this pageant will run for about 22 days until the 31st of May, with various events planned throughout. What exactly is planned? Well, listen in to Uma's report.
So Telangana is sparkling with beauties from 109 countries, of course all of them contestants for the 72nd Miss World Beauty Pageant, and that is going to be held on the 31st is the finale. But before that, Telangana wants to use this opportunity to showcase the state on the international stage, and with the tagline Telangana Zuran, and that's the reason why they have curated multiple events across the state. At the Charminar, it was the traditional Marfa band that welcomed all these beauties from across the world, and global style and glamour was shaking hands with history and culture as a heritage walk was organized for the beauty. And there was not just a photo shoot at the 400-year-old monument. The dignitaries also shopped at the Lad Bazaar, or what is also called the Churi Bazaar, for the lakh bangles, for the zari work, and also for the pearls that are available there. The beauties also have gone to explore the Kakatiya landmarks, and for that the entourage has been split into groups, and one group in fact went to what is called as the Ramappa temple, and that's a UNESCO heritage site where all of them went in fact in traditional Indian attire that was designed by Indian designers as well, and there they are being welcomed with traditional dances. And after that, this is these beauties are in fact going to what is also called the Ramappa Fort. One stop for them was at, of course, the 1,000-pillar temple, the Warangal 1,000-pillar temple, which is the oldest Shaivite temple, and there they are going to be praying to Lord Rudreshwara, and of course photo shoots everywhere it will happen. And then they are going to be, witnessing what is expected to be a rather stunning performance of the Perini Shiva Tandavam.
Well, in other news, Tom Cruise brought the house down at the Cannes Film Festival with the world premiere of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. The film earned a 5-minute standing ovation, largely fueled by Cruise's death-defying stunts and raw on-screen intensity, marking an emotional farewell to the franchise he's headlined for nearly 3 decades.